I'm going to record this so we can share with others. And then in the chat here, let's see. Here is a link, and that document has a link to a deck that I'll go through. And it's got suggestions, some questions, introduction to the overall methodology, why it's useful, and kind of stage one homework that people can kind of scale as you have time. It's a really easy research stack and methodology, but it grabs some of the best insights from the best practices and mental models currently out there. So really excited to share it. We'll start formally in just a minute. We'll give a few more folks a chance to get here. And I will see about doing a screen share here. Right. And so this is the document that we'll have the link to. Is that showing up for everybody?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to wait till 7:02 and then we'll start rolling. Does that sound good? We'll start it quick. We'll get in, and it's going to be pretty fun. Overall, give kind of an introduction and a context on this document here. I'll go into a presentation I gave at the Delta CX Concentric Conference recently, which was the genesis of this class. After that presentation, folks were like, hey, where can we learn this? And I said, well, it's kind of my thing, so I guess I should try to turn this into something that can be shared. So I've successfully used it in really many clutch situations, and it's a nice kind of it's my go-to process if all else fails. And then we can go through a little bit of what that might look like. It's not really a methodology per se, it's just more of a general process. So it can be customized, but the overall idea is that we're looking at patterns, both idiosyncratic to the page we're looking at, and then we're looking at how those patterns manifest across both industry verticals and through functions, right, like the e-commerce conversion patterns and things like that. It's different from a UI pattern, because that's a very explicit set of elements and patterns that make up a design system. This is a bit more abstract because it has to do with the process, the psychology, the moving parts, and how really the core things that stack up to make a digital product work come together. All right, so it probably sounds like I already started the class, and maybe I have, but welcome to everybody that's here now. As you can tell, I'm really geeked out about this stuff, happy to share it, and excited to get feedback to see if this is useful for folks. So welcome to the class. There will be 3 consecutive classes. At the end of it, we'll have a really good kind of report that is has some broad generalities covered that are, common frames, but it will also have elements highlighted that are unique to you as well, because it's not a rote or reductive methodology, but an approach, as I had said. So meant to be fun and casual, please bear with me as I carry on. And if I tend to sometimes either over explain or make things a bit abstract. So, pull me back down to earth as I talk about this, ask questions, jump in as anything occurs. And I think we'll do well there. And a third thing I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to do a live demonstration of the first part of the process, which is the reverse wireframes, so that you can get a feature function list. So it'll kind of be fun. We can go through that, and you can see, I'll kind of do a think aloud as I do the process. It's very simple, and let's just jump right in. So it's always available regardless of budget. It provides actionable results with a great return on time. And it can be used with low risk. There's low bias in this process. So it can be conducted by product managers, UX designers, dedicated UX researchers alike. And to jump into the first part of it and why it's useful and why it's important, we'll go to this presentation, the DNA of UI. 3 ways feature function priority lists improve your product design. And this gives some good context into, sort of the why this is so powerful, because it can actually, part of it is that it can be missed because it's so subtle, and that's part of its power. And I'll go into that here. So the DNA of UI, can you write out the features and functions of your digital product in a simple ordered list, right? If not, there may not be a viable product there yet. And it's so deceptively simple to say, can you create an ordered list of everything from logo to menu to, primary visual to, value proposition, call to action, buttons, all of that can be put in a certain order as it's intended to be perceived as a content strategy. And a lot of apps just don't have this really figured out. It can't be reduced that well in this process. But what this does is it really helps designers make prioritized decisions. It helps compare apples to apples as far as what competition is doing. And it really helps to understand what the existing mental model is out there in the ecosystem or competitive landscape. So it's really simply just an ordered list of all the UI content and functional affordances in a digital product. It's as I alluded to, in a rather sparsely populated area of the cognitive map. Reductive in nature, analytically it makes sense, but it's difficult to envision by some, and it's far too minimal to be useful to others. Examples are stakeholders might take a look at this and say, okay, but where's the design? Where's the product, right? Because it's just an ordered list. It's not wireframes, it's not shiny objects, it's not animations and those types of things. But then designers will also look at this and say, this is too, ridiculous. It doesn't give me any information on simultaneous priorities, on a gestalt of the overall, aesthetic, things like that. But what it does do is provide a very exact meeting ground between those two kind of approaches. And that's very good for business, and that's very good for stakeholder alignment. So here's a really simple one I did. And this was of, I think, a tablet view of CNN. Right. And really making it incredibly simple, because there's different levels of kind of veracity. You could actually go for the placement of the logo, of the menu, et cetera, et cetera. Here, what I did was created just a block category with the elements inside of it, right? And then the banner, boom, breaking news, and an exit. Everything that is a feature is content, images, words, anything, and then a function is anything like a navigation, like the exit there, a hyperlink to play a video. And those two things are all that go in any app ever. And so it's a really reductive filter that ends up being pretty useful, because what you could do here is, for example, take a look at this next to analysis of Fox News, right? Very different approaches. Fox News had, instead of the banner of happening now, it had like a disclaimer, different content priorities, but a lot of similarities as well. So if, for example, somebody said, hey, we want to go ahead and design a news site. We want to know, we want to apply the best practices of the major sites, but we also want to add some hyperlocal content in ways that are really accessible and maybe, kind of engaging for folks, right? Or connect that to social media. So you could do a broad survey then really quickly of these websites, of let's say, the top 5 websites by either visitors or by revenue. Look at the patterns and say, okay, look, here's everybody's doing this. Only 2 people are doing this, and so it simplifies it in a way that it makes really broad strategic insights easily possible, right? And comparative analysis. I'll give an example here that's even more specific. So on a FDA cleared medical device, it was a project I was working on, and I can't go into any more specifics about the particulars, but what was happening was there was a new product line, and there were some reports that were patient reports that needed to be generated. And so what hadn't been done was nobody had taken a look at the three top competitors. In this case, there were only three top competitors in the field. But one thing this kind of reductive analysis showed me in less than 2 hours, without deep subject matter expertise, without being a physician, without knowing the regulatory frameworks, but just looking at a comparative analysis of the best practices in those models, was that a physician's signature was featured prominently on all three of them and was not currently within the product scoping. The team had said that they had deliberately made a decision to not do that, and I had said, well, hey, let's go ahead and take a second look at that and make sure that is the case. And then that element did find its way into one of the prototypes, right? So the example again is abstract; it's not particular to any particular use case, but it does show that one can harness all of the expertise, harness all of the insights of the best stuff out there, just through this process to really act as a safeguard, if that makes sense. So I've just found it incredibly useful, even just for finding one thing in 2 hours time. And there were actually, the exercise yielded far more insights, and I was able to teach the process to the team. So then they were able to do that moving forward. Please do interject with any questions, or I will ramble on. So competitive research, as I mentioned before, this establishes current best practices, and it sets the baseline that needs to be met by improvement or innovation, right? There's two basic approaches: either find something at a market that's being met well and meet it better, or meet it differently, innovate or disrupt. And so knowing where the terrain is to push or pull against is invaluable, and it's all out there for free. Concept testing. So you can run against the mental model established by the competitive research before qualitative testing. Something like, how does this stack up against Amazon's one-click, e-commerce conversion, right? That's kind of a gold standard. That moves so much money. And so you could say, as a baseline, is this a feature we're going to meet? Is this something that people have concerns about? Maybe they find it too easy to shop, so you could improve on the competition there, right? And it maps out the opportunities for innovation. Hey, let's do this but try to do it better, or let's find out where people are having a hard time with this. Layaway is making a comeback, which is cool, right? And so there's kind of a layaway feature instead of a one-click purchase, one-click layaway, right? Again, just ideating out of things that show up when we make a comparative analysis in this manner. And design workflows. If you love your designers or are a designer yourself, these workflows from a feature function priority list make life so much easier. Decisions are easier, alignment is simplified across stakeholders, and the process is really thoroughly documented. This also keeps folks on kind of a not necessarily mobile first, but really, if it doesn't work in a fairly linear flow through kind of a mobile process, one might revisit their product or app to simplify it so that it does work with that flow, and then that the desktop view is really just an enhanced version of that. Does that all make sense? That takes us through the deck there.
Hi, Eric. This is Kayleen. I first heard of quote unquote met you through the Concentric conference, and I just have a question about this whole process. It feels like you would need a lot of research on information architecture done before doing this. So what is your, how do you separate, interaction design and information architecture from designing the UI? To me, they're different things. Wanted to get your take on that.
Absolutely, right? So this part is just the reverse wireframe to get the feature function priority, but then we want to map the task flow model. So that's actually a great segue. into the process, right? So, here you would go through the reverse wireframe process that we just kind of went through, or at least an overview. We'll do the demo here in a minute. And then you would make that list, right? And these are all in gray, just examples of potential, how do we say, entries for that. Nothing is really set or determined. Some things are pretty common, logo, menu, media, headline. But it's also important when you encounter, new structures or features, not to be afraid to make them your own and to come up with new nomenclature. This is not a sort of a reductive and very quantitative process. It's qualitative, but we do introduce some comparative processes at this, sort of, lower quantitative scope, if you will, right? A lot of times just mapping out the first 20 features and functions can give a real insight. But of course, if you're doing it fully, you'd want to do it end to end, either for a page or map it to user flow, primary tasks, the things to be done, right? It's interesting, the see-do model is really the feature and function thing as well. What do they see on the page and what do they do on the page, right? So there's the content and the functionality. Does that make sense, Kayleen?
Yeah, I'm curious to see you do the demo. I tend to learn better when I watch somebody else apply concepts. I was gonna say one other thing. The DNA of UI slide deck. Did you want other people to access that slide deck,
I
or?
did. Are you able to?
No, I can't. It asked me to ask for permission, which is a whole thing
Yes.
of
No.
sending you an
Thank you. I was
email.
remiss in sharing that.
Yeah, I meant to say something. I think we were talking about it in the chat, but I also didn't want to interrupt you. So
Yes. No. Thank you. You guys keep me honest here. It is the pilot, and I really should have made that public sharing it. So thank you. Thank you for that note.
yes, of course.
All right. I also noticed that some folks were kept out in the waiting room, and I apologize for that. It should be open now. I'm working on a new computer. I just set it up today. It's one of the new iMacs, but I don't have everything streamlined. So I want to thank everybody for their patience. Anybody can review that first kind of 15 minutes of class on the video when I get it uploaded. And my apologies for anybody that was kept waiting there. Is everybody in and doing well? I see Randy. Hello, my friend. He was there at the concentric. He had introduced and moderated. So hello to everyone. So yeah, I'm going to go through this process a bit, and we'll see one if it makes sense. Two, I kind of like the idea of one of the questions at the end is what would you change on this stack to really make it your own, right? Are there processes that you like that would fit in well? Does this work sort of perfectly? I find it's a pretty good kind of minimum set, but we're getting a little bit of background noise. I'm going to go ahead and, okay, excellent. Thank you. Much appreciated. And so going through, obviously, the feature function priority list, that's the real DNA of how the thing works. And then the tasks and goals, right? So the task model can be mapped out really simply, almost in a sort of a flow chart. Again, not a high fidelity way. One of the tricks here is abstracting it into a symbol, because then you're able to work with it cognitively in a different way. It's not as richly associated creatively, so it's an easier object to move around and make decisions with and about. Similarly, the visual style and mood, some of these are taken from established matrices, right? Funny versus serious, formal versus casual. But mood could be as descriptive as you want. There's not a really well-established kind of rubric for descriptors for mood. but the overall tone, is it light or dark visually? The colors, the hex colors, looking at how the branding is done, all the way down to, for example, looking at the colors was another exercise in the medical industry of looking at displays for physicians when they were triaging patients based on medical information. So looking at the top, I think it was half dozen or so of these dashboards. One of the things we mapped out were the alert colors, and the alert colors were relatively consistent, but there were some outliers, and they introduced a new alert color, which was purple, which we hadn't really been considering. So we were able to map out, okay, most folks are using, they're using red, they're using a more it's not quite a yellow, but a contrasty orange, and then they're using a green that's of a similar value to those three. That's most common, globally with what people would expect from the mental model. And then, attaching the nomenclature to it, right, as well. So some was, alert, or, caution, or, one was something, it wasn't quite panic, but there is an interesting range of terminology. But we were able to say, okay, what most people using this most of the time are hearing this term. And then we could make the decision, do we want to go with that, which is by default probably a good decision, or do we want to innovate here or differentiate ourselves in a particular way, and then we can do so strategically. Right. So all these seem really simple, and looking at them, okay, the colors, here's the hex codes, here are the fonts, but all of those, when especially comparatively analyzed across two, three or more of these type of audits, become incredibly insightful as far as the overall mental map. Copywriting, again, the tone is the same as the visual creative. You can look at vocabulary level, you can look at the media formats as part of the strategy. And then get into rating those, right? Are the photos aspirational? Are they specifically user generated content for credibility? Are they pulling stuff from social media? Is it influencers, right? Is it really high level aspirational content, or is it something that's softer, more inspiring, or is it something that's abstracted by being an illustration? All of those give a real big how do we say, kind of glimpse into the psychology and the content strategy. One of, okay, here's all the features and functions, and two, here's what they're doing with them from a visual style, from a copywriting style, and then moving into a content strategy and sort of the business model. Right. So you'll look at the micro copy and tone of voice, both within the app, but also in kind of the wayfinding, right? And how people get around, how things are titled, and that sort of thing. And then you can look into the revenue model, right? Oftentimes, if applicable, it's advertising, it's data. They're selling, reselling data. They're, like Facebook, something like that, or a subscription model, like a number of periodicals and, news organizations. Conversion and billing flow, one click, the upsell kind of membership, the nudge, we talked about that. One thing I would be interested in doing, this is way in the future, but, standardizing maybe some of these, if this thing proves useful for folks, maybe standardizing some of these, but there will always be occasion for new terms to be introduced, right? So I don't want it to ever get proprietary. I want this just to be like, it's useful, it's cool, get out there, do it, make it your own. If there's a better way to do it, I'm sure there are better ways of doing it, right? This is a cool stack I've put together, but by no means does that represent the power of collective intelligence in making this better than I could have ever dreamed of. This looks like it was here more for layout, because it looks like we're taking care of that up above. And really, when you get down to the revenue model and how they're achieving that, that is, that's the real last part of the equation, right? Okay, how does this thing work? How does it make money? How does it, how does it need a payroll? And that's really a key thing about it. So it combines all of the really nerve centers of the elements that make an app tick, right? So, what's in it, what does it do for the person? How is billing accomplished? And how does that work with the way that they, with the tone of voice and the visual kind of journey there. So does that make sense? And of course, there's some things in looking at it that could be added or taken away. But what I found is the ones that kind of made the cut for me are the ones that really generate an actionable insight on the analytical side. So they've all sort of earned their keep on my list by producing results, even if they look sometimes to me a little anemic, right? Well, what could you learn from just the font, right? But it's the mix, and it's the weight of the mix, because it's light enough data that you can move it around, you can apprehend it and compare it, right? So it's very right sized. It's not too much to carry in your head, but it is enough to spark insights and have productive conversations with stakeholders. Stakeholders get this because it's a very simple common ground. So what I will do is what I want is so think of this. I want folks to recommend a website, and I'll take a screenshot and do a live demo. And then that relates to what I would invite everybody to explore as a potential question to answer. In looking at this as we go through, are there any things that you would add or remove to kind of make it your own, to make it unique, to make it somehow better? And it may be too early to really know that, but just thoughts on the subject. And then the assignment would be pick 3 websites that interest you. Maybe it's a field you're working on. Maybe you have a expertise. Maybe you're just curious about, how, what makes these 3 websites tick. And we take a screenshot of the pages as they appear on your screen, just above the fold, right? We're not going to go through the whole flow. We're just going to get a taste of this, but it's amazing what just cataloging the first 20, 25 features and functions will do for insights. So you'll create labeled reverse wireframes over the screenshot in Google Sheets or whatever, you can do this in Illustrator. You can do this in Figma or Sketch, very easy to do, and then make a written prioritized feature function list of the first 20 elements. And I'll just flash back to this as a very simple example of how you could take a tablet view of CNN, break it into hieratic ordered kind of blocks of what's happening, right? Very conventional headlines, none of these, right? There might, call to action, primary image, key visual is sometimes used in the industry, but whatever works to be a clear descriptor, right? And then going through and adding all of the features and functions, right? Logo is a feature, a live link is a function, takes you somewhere. And this list, breaking it down, is really where the magic happens. And I keep feeling like I have to sell it because through experience, it's too simple. It's too easy, right? It's too close. It's too, it's almost too profound, right? We don't see the value in it. But then I promise it's there. So I'm seeing a lot of activity in the chat. Maybe I'm not keeping up on everybody, so I apologize there. Cool. All right. Hello, everybody. The humming noise, I don't know if that's my air conditioner. I apologize if it is. And I'm all caught up here. But I would like, let's see. The third person, we'll pick the third person who comes in, and everybody at the same time type in a website you'd like to see me do a reverse wireframe exercise on. Sound good? We got one. And if we just get one, we'll go with that too. All right, let's see. I think we'll go with that. And Curious. Oh, we have, oh, Jeep.com. That's coming in. I was too slow in typing. All right, Jeep.com. So Command Shift 4 here. I don't know, on Mac, just really easily done. Bam. All right. And then let's see if we can just pull that. All right. So we just pull it in here. It's easy because it's fairly simple, and you can use the vector elements, and then share these, and but any platform will do. And let's see. All right. So what we're going to do then is we're going to select shapes, and just going in here. And again, we could do it where we go granular, and do the logo. But I think overall, what we can do is call this, whole bit here, just navigation, right? And then we will, when we create the list, we'll break out explicitly all of the elements that are within the navigation. Here. Now I'm kind of seeing in the background, this key visual is fairly global, and this is where it's somewhat subjective, right? It's like the navigation, I'm sorry, the key visual could be third, arguably, right? But also when they're grouped, where it's second or third becomes less relevant. So that nuance, it doesn't require the reductive veracity that one would think, as a somewhat subjective, qualitative process. But what could help is if you have, if ideally, 5 or 6 different auditors went through, then, that would take some of the variance out of it. That seems like a bit of a luxury. So, but that is a little point on methodology, that it is somewhat subjective. And so if we, got some type of, between 3, 4, 5, or 6 different auditors on it, that would tend to really reduce that, the way that we're read. It could also be broken down on like eye tracking software, things like that, depending on how robust somebody wanted to get with it. But what I found is really, if it's 1 or 2 or 2 or 3 of the places, that is not as critical as it might seem. So here I will, with these, I believe, now, all right, well, I will make this transparent for the, let's see, and then we can add our other elements here, right? So let's say then we come here. And on this, again, you see how we're basically doing reverse wireframes. What we have here is this kind of the value proposition and call to action in a box. It's a very traditional pattern. You get there, navigation. Okay, where am I? This is great. It's exciting. There's the car I want. And it's a good deal. Okay, let's click explore. It's not even an overcommitment, right? It's a soft sell. It's not like buy now. It's explore Jeep Cherokee. Or if that's not your cup of tea, you go to these other 4, right? So in looking at that, all that becomes fairly apparent. And so here you could say that this is a kind of a overall CTA, what maybe value proposition, right? Is it proposition? Am I spelling that right? Value prop. Another great thing about UX pattern research is you don't even have to spell. So let's say we get our value prop here, and then we can go in further, and for example, you know, if you wanted to say visual element, right? There's that. You could say, overall, to me, that copy is the value proposition. And so I would go ahead and, how do we say then? Maybe we don't even need the secondary containment. So as I go, let's say we just put the button in, and then we can call it good. So and this is not as glamorous as one might like, but it gets the job done. So let's say that we now hopefully have these ordered well. And so it starts to look something like that, right? And then let's say, I mean, this looks like a timed slider, so we could mention that. But what this does is really simplifies what happens. Let's say we take a look at this, and then here, why not be thorough? And just interject if I'm being too pedantic here, but I did want to do a live demo. And then what would this be, Oh my Lord. Sorry, I locked myself out. My apologies. You didn't know it was going to be a comedy routine. Unable to open presentation intro. Anyone else having? I tried to make the link public for everyone. Let me get that done. Alternate model 1. I will work on that microphone, Randy. I apologize. But let's say we, here. So essentially with this, then we've got what we need to start making that feature function list, right? Is it helpful for me to be doing this live for folks? I feel a bit humble, but I think it's
helpful for me considering I've never done this before. So when you said reverse wireframe, I kind of got the idea, but
cool.
So I appreciate it.
Cool.
Yeah, I like it too.
So bam. And so what could be done here then is even, let's say we go here and we get rid of navigation. So now all of a sudden, the background image. So now we've got these reverse wireframes that really sum up the essence of what's happening on that. We could definitely go in more on the navigation and get into some nuance there, right? But that's really not super critical to what's happening in the overall gestalt of the experience. People go, okay, navigation. But they're looking for logo, right? First thing people want is, am I in the right place? Where am I? Is this where I want to be? Okay, Jeep, yep. Okay, I'm on their website is what they'll kind of, put a pin in, in looking at the navigation. This is a full website. It's not just a funnel page or, something like that. And then they'll go, their mind will really drink in that image, which is nice and exciting and brings it to life, as well as, again, confirms like, hey, we're here to, sell cars. And then the value prop gets into some particulars. Okay, here's the details. The details seem credible and I can click without commitment, right? That's a really common kind of flow. And that becomes really easy to analyze. And if they're not, if they're not whatever it was, a fan of this model, then they bring them right down their stack into like, hey, what car type are you? So they're probably leading with their most popular model, although sometimes that they can smart target and things like that, based on your browsing history. But there's a lot of things that you can sort of look at and really make simple, right? And then what we would do here is then we go, nav, key visual. You don't have to be able to type to do UX research.
I really like the way that this is actually laid out. We've had to do competitive assessments, analyses for the agency I work for.
Mhm.
And having it reverse wireframe is actually a really good idea, because we might take a screenshot and put like, well, this is what we're seeing. But I notice that clients tend to struggle when they see just visuals, or they see, the UI, they see the photography, but they don't actually see the other stuff that makes up that foundation. So we go off on tangents. It's actually a really good idea. So it's super helpful. Thank you.
Yes, the cure for shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Because it's reductive, it's boring, and it's gray. All of those are your friends, right? In these discussions, because it keeps it focused on the actual, structural elements.
Yeah.
Then the navigation, here would go, you could do something like logo, what I don't know what, link, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can go as simple as, just this level that I've kind of put together, but the task is really to reduce it into a non-visual ordered list. It's almost like, there's the two hemispheres of the brain. There's the visual, and then there's the analytical. We're taking this through a process across one filter and back to the other side, and that's what keeps it so grounded and so safe, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so you could do this. I've done long form of, pages get pretty endless, but you can rip through it pretty quick, right? You want to grab the overall, the essence of what the element is, or the content section is, and then, what it's doing in as simply a descriptor as possible. And then everything else becomes so easy to digest. Yeah. So hopefully that's clicking for folks. I think I've rambled on for about 45 minutes now, so I'd like to open it up for any questions. Any concerns, any comments?
So for the homework, or for picking the 3 websites, do you suggest picking websites that are related or completely different? Does it matter?
It doesn't. If they're related, you get that kind of lens, right? But if they're really disparate, then you get to see how they're being done across industries, right? And sometimes the best insights come from, places that are outside. One thing I did a long research project for Capital Group, American funds, and they were doing they're selling. They were modeling their in-person selling, and they were being a little too soft with their call to action. And so what we did is we said, hey, look at what Amazon's doing. Look at how they're moving people forward. This might seem crass in person, but actually people are very accustomed to, instead of learn more, going to shop now. So we kind of took something across industry verticals, and that can be really rich. So there's no rule. It's actually the more comparison, the better.
Thanks.
I get way too excited about this stuff, huh? It could be some topics that are, websites that are of interest in a field that you're working in, or personal interest. There's really no right or wrong answer. You could go with the most popular sites. I mean, if you do this to Google, for example, it really shows that Google's strategy is simplicity and a single affordance, right? And then it allows you into its kind of family of products. But when you go on the Google page, there's very little there, and that's reflected in the feature function priority. yeah, anyway, so I think I started rambling there, but I think, you know, either comparative, you know, clustered or distributed.
So I have a really dumb question.
There are no dumb questions.
So when reading the assignment, do I just within the Google Doc that's there, do we just add to it at the bottom? And then that would be, or do I submit a completely separate document and attach it to the classroom?
What I would do is, if you want, open up a deck of your own in Google Slides and start it there. You know, generally these are just kind of the handouts for the class, but I do like the idea of contributing. But what I want is really for you to have at the end of this, you know, 3 kind of research, you know, UX kind of pattern research reports that you can have as examples. You can have, like, so I want you to own them. So I would say create a deck, you know, make it your own, and then kind of add this stuff. But feel free to copy and paste anything from what I have. But I would think, yeah, just get these decks built, because they're going to be great artifacts for you. They're going to be great, you know, elements to feature on professional sites. And yeah.
Okay. So just to be clear, I'm not submitting anything to you or the class. This is more for me.
Absolutely. So what we can do is we can kind of share them. And so I think, you know, you could post a link. So if you know, easy way to submit, I think, and I think that's a good point. I'll clarify that mechanism. But if you just want to submit a link to the deck, we can go through. I will look and comment and give feedback on every single one. And it could be that one becomes a good, you know, discussion item for class next week. So yeah, I think if we want to hand them in, it's not really graded. It's just more of the feedback. I want to make sure everybody gets it. You know what I mean? I want to make sure this is useful for folks, and that I communicate it well. So I think absolutely do that. And if you want feedback, or if you want to, I think, you know, peer review is excellent. So you know, just we'll submit some links for that. That's excellent.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Is anybody confused about anything? Are there any terms that were not explained well?
This is just a small question, Eric, but like I would have probably called that one thing a promotion. I mean, no, on that one, it was talking about a particular Jeep. A lot of those things in that spot seem to be like about a 4th of July sale and stuff like that. Is there a reason that you typically go with like value prop, or would you sometimes have gone with saying a promotion?
I love that insight. So the value prop is a very high level generic descriptor for what's happening, but the, you know, the nuance and articulation of the fact that it is a seasonal promotion that has monetary incentives gets really specifically into how the marketing conversion is happening within the digital product. So it absolutely lends itself to that additional detail. But it also works at that really, you know, kind of mid focal point of it just being the value proposition. But of course, more insight's always better. So it just depends on the intent of your analysis. If you want to say, hey, you know, specifically, how are they incentivizing these? You know, okay, yeah, it's powerful. It's a, you know, seasonal. There's a lot of you know, emotional equity that's associated with the 4th of July and, you know, patriotism and Jeeps, like that's their deal. So you could analyze that within this context if that's where you wanted to kind of zoom in.
I think it's just, when I talk with people, I think that some of the people I talk with just use the word value prop differently. like
Sure. Yeah.
You know, I think it's just a wording thing. All right.
Well, absolutely. And I think that, you know, feedback on the nomenclature is good too, right? To me, the value proposition is just an overall and maybe antiquated kind of, you know, marketing framing of, you know, the value proposition fits almost anything in that type of category. But I think, refining common terms is good. And I think, clarifying where, my use of the term might differ from the more common mental model that you're referring to, right? So the feedback's great. And I don't want a value proposition to be misleading. And that's why I think everybody should make it their own, right? That's why when you're working with your clients in your context, Randy, you're going to explain that, and that's going to be your voice, right? And so you would definitely clarify, that term, and I think others would, as well. Yeah, cool. And another thing about the UX pattern research is it saves you time. I think that what we've gone through is so easy to grasp that we might even be at a point where we could get 10 minutes back. But I'm happy to discuss further. But it seems like, can everybody either through a little icon or a wave of the hand, does everybody feel like they got a good kind of grasp on this first bit and the direction they might want to head with it? They feel kind of, good about jumping in, maybe doing the assignment and all that?
Yeah, this was helpful. Thank you.
Excellent, cool. And so we'll get into some of more of the analysis that we looked at next week. We'll review some of these, and we'll get a little bit more into breaking down some of the tasks and flows that we kind of looked at. The visual style and mood is very important, and the tone of voice as they inform the overall, content strategy, or the sort of psychology behind the, conversion or content engagement or whatever the product is trying to do, and then finishing by seeing how that turns it into money, just at least enough money to keep it in business, if not enough to make everybody rich and or change the industry. So that'll be how we round that out. And I'm excited to look at everybody's work. I'll do this because it's just how I am. I will also do 3. I will pick 3, and then we can kind of go through, those and how we might get into some comparative analysis based on those patterns. And that'll be fun. Cool. All right, so does everybody have a link? Everybody's been invited to the class, so there's a Google Classroom. I think everybody should be there. And I've also sent direct email invites to the meetings on Google Calendar. So hopefully that's got everybody, functioning and having access to it, whether they want to go on the Classroom platform or not. And just ping me directly if anything's not working, if I can update stuff, change an email address, answer any questions, or put any questions up on that chat screen in the classroom. So this was super fun for me, and I shouldn't be embarrassed that I enjoy research, because I really do. Randy, I'm honored to see you here, my friend. This whole class came from the question that was like, hey, where can we learn this? At the conference that you were moderating, and I said, well, hey, I better do something about it. So
Yeah,
very excited.
I told you there. I was like, I think we should talk again, but here we are. So
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, if that works, let's everybody get 5 minutes back, and we'll meet next week. And please ping me directly with any questions.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.